I would like to call our meeting back to formal order. Our next item is an opportunity for the public to come before us again to talk about the issues here of voting machines and other matters. And we have set aside 30 minutes for this with 2 minutes apiece, and we've had more than 15 people sign up, so we'll just have to see how it goes. But I would encourage people to be as prompt and concise as possible, particularly the people that have spoken here to us before. And I hope I won't mispronounce the names. If I do, please correct me. It's not intentional. But we start with our number one thing, Diana Wynn, the League of Women Voters of Wake County. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Diana Wynn, President of the League of Women Voters of Wake County. The League opposes the certification of voting machines that don't use hand-marked paper ballots. Any equipment that relies on proprietary software is potentially vulnerable, whether from foreign tampering or from configuration errors. Without paper records, there are very few ways to audit and verify contested elections. Selections recorded in a barcode are inherently unreadable by humans and cannot be properly audited. The League, as well as the public, reasonably believed that legislation passed last year provided protection against the use of such voting machines. The intent of this law should be honored. Attempts to assess the ownership of the vendors of voting machines have failed to provide definitive answers. We know that Hart InterCivic is primarily owned by investment group HIG Hart, that Raging Capital Opportunity Fund has significant ownership of Clear Ballot Group, and that ES&S is primarily owned by the McCarthy Group, which in turn owns a controlling interest in Government Systems Software and Services, LLC. This information is not particularly enlightening. We do not know, and will never fully know, who has a financial or political interest within any of these layers of investment and ownership. This uncertainty is likely to apply to any vendor. Only hand-marked paper ballots, followed by risk-limiting audits, meet all recommended criteria for secure elections. The League of Women Voters urges the board to place a priority on security. Thank you.
I believe our next speaker is Jane Pepler. Thank you.
I do a lot of canvassing. I've been canvassing in Rocky Mount this year. I've been knocking on every door, Democrats, Republicans, people who've never registered to vote, people who are registered but haven't voted for a long time. And the narrative that we heard in 2016, 2017, 2018, that my vote doesn't matter, is amplified now. I've been in trailer parks 7 hours yesterday, 3 hours this morning. People there know, they've heard about the Bladen County fiasco. They've heard about what's gone on in Atlanta with the erased records of the machines, and they've heard how in places where they use these machines, they can be divvied out so that the suburbs get the nice new machines, and lots of them, and the inner city people get a few machines that are broken. And by that means, they can control how many people vote. You may or may not think this is true, but this is what people think. And I think that giving people a barcode when they leave is an insult. I think North Carolina in particular, after what happened in Bladen County, people are just ready to think there's no reason to vote because it isn't going to matter. And I think that hand-marked paper ballots is the only way. I have that in my precinct. I have that opportunity to write myself and know that it happened. And finally, I would like to say, why would you spend all this money to get something that's so much worse than a pen? You got to follow the money. It reminds me when NASA spent all that money to make a pen that would write in space, and then the Soviets said, well, you could use a pencil. Somebody's making a lot of money off this, and your voters are not dumb, and they know it.
Thank you.
Ms. Beckler,
Yes.
which county do you live in?
I live in Orange County, but I canvass in Nash County.
Orange County?
Ms. Bernstein, this is to be a joint presentation of you and Nick.
That's correct. My husband and I are both, we're going to speak back to back, sort of as a cohesive team.
And we've given you 4 minutes.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate that. My name is Lynn Bernstein. I am an election security advocate. I've done a lot of work in integration and test engineering in the aerospace field. As you guys are well aware, cybersecurity experts nearly all recommend hand-marked paper ballots, as do other elections experts. I did look on your webpage. About 36 out of 42 of the comments from the last demo last year were voters writing in to ask specifically for hand-marked paper ballots, either in the form of pen and paper, good old-fashioned ballots, and so forth. I actually contacted a number of those voters, and they rewrote comments to you guys, which I appreciate you posting. Our legislators also agree that we should use hand-marked paper ballots. Wrong slide. You're right here. So I'm sure you guys are aware of the petition for rulemaking that I submitted. Our statutes say that the system must permit the voter to correct any discrepancy between the electronic vote and the paper ballot. And obviously, ES&S's system that provides this barcode ballot does not allow me as a voter to correct any discrepancy. So it actually fails to afford me my statutory right.
Ms. Bernstein, when I saw the equipment over there, they actually printed out a ballot that had the markings on it showing where either the machine or the human actually made the marks.
Right.
Now, I take it what you're arguing is that because the tabulator reads the barcode,
That is correct,
you
sir.
don't think that's correct. Now, you're aware these other machines also read off the lines that are around.
That's correct. Those just line up the ballot, sir. I mean, in any sort of optical scanner, I mean, even the test that my children use in school, you have to be able to line those up to read where the bubbles are. But I think most people can agree that when you have a ballot where you can actually read what your vote is, I mean, this barcode right here, the barcode at the top, make no mistake about it, that is the vote. Those tabulators, the DS200s that we have are great. They work with hand-marked paper ballots. The ballot summary card that ES&S's device, the Express Vote, outputs is this ballot summary card. The top part has a barcode, right? So that's what's read. That's the vote. And I can't even know if there's a discrepancy there. So, okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
All right. So what I've done at the last meeting, I asked this board to please explain to me how you came about your decision, despite the fact that essentially experts, voters, even our legislators agree that we need a verifiable hand-marked paper ballot. So what I've done here is I've made a pros and cons list for hand-marked paper ballots. They're simple and easy to understand. They're easy to train poll workers on. Paper is unhackable. They are the best record of voter intent. And I mentioned this before, that as voters fill out their ballot, they're actually verifying their ballot as they fill them out. It's not a secondary step that you're asking voters to do. That's also an optional step. Most voters do not verify their ballot. We do eliminate overvotes because the DS200 that we use in North Carolina and 100s, they don't allow voters to overvote. It spits the ballot back out and they're allowed to spoil that ballot and re-vote. They are obviously less expensive. I purchased these pens for 8 cents a piece. The ballot marking devices that these vendors would like to sell are upwards of $3,500 a piece, and they can only service 120 voters per day unless you want astronomical lines. And so I like to introduce my husband. So what I'm asking you guys to do, I have a marker. I've made a pros column here. You guys never provided the voters with the cons here of what is the problem with the hand-marked paper ballots, other than a very small number of ballots that need adjudication. So I'm asking you guys to just take a couple minutes and write down, fill that out so that all these voters understand why you would recommend to all these county officials to not use hand-marked paper ballots and to go with a system that has these barcodes. There are vendors here that offer options that don't have a layer of secrecy in that barcode. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nick Bernstein. I'm a senior systems analyst and a senior software manager at the leading global surgical robotics company. And there's actually a lot of similarities between surgical robots and voting systems. I would say they are both critical infrastructure. I mean, one is infrastructure, the other is critical to the patient. And I know at my company, we take our security very seriously. And there are some things I'd just like to go over just briefly. First, I just want to tell everyone, if you do the math, 2 ES&S systems is $7,000. That is enough ballpoint pens for every single voter in the state, with a million to spare. So I just want to talk about safety and security best practices. Awesome, this comes out. 3 quick things. 1, conduct an FMEA, that's a failure mode and effects analysis. Every system is hackable. Every system is hackable. Don't let anyone tell you any differently. You have to figure out how they are hackable. Hopefully these guys have done their homework. You should know that they did. Also, you need to conduct a risk assessment for all possible failures. And I'm going to make this really simple. I'd love to share this all with you later, so I'm going to have to skip the failure analysis. No, I'll do that. Come back here. It's really simple. You want to reduce your risk. If you're going to allow ballots, please allow only barcode ballots when they are absolutely necessary. You have the power to do that. To limit ballot marking devices to just those who absolutely require them. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, sir. Our next speaker is, please help me pronounce this, Ailette Colston. Is that correct? And you're from Apex.
Raleigh. I live in Raleigh. On behalf of the Raleigh Apex branch of the North Carolina NAACP, President Gerald D. Gibbons Jr., who can't be here today, good evening. My name is Ailette Colston. I'm the Political Action Chair of Raleigh Apex branch of the NAACP. The ability to have fair elections is the foundation of our American form of government. This past week, we found out from the United States Senate intelligence report that just came out at the end of the week. In the report, they found that Russians targeted U.S. voting systems, processes, and voting machine companies, and that Russian interference impacted at some level, there was some level of intrusion in all 50 states. Specifically, they found that the DRE machines, I'm reading directly from the report here, direct recording of electronic voting machines can be programmed to show one result to the voter while recording a different result in the tabulation. Without a paper backup, a recount would use the same faulty software to retabulate the same results. I ask that all of you read this report, and I ask that you request every member of every county, all 100 county boards of elections, should read this report to get a better understanding of the vulnerabilities. In the United States, in the Declaration of Independence, we said that a government of right derives its authority from the just consent of the governed, and we show that consent by voting. So an attack on elections is an attack on the authority and the legitimacy of our form of government. Paper ballots, including those marked by automark for voters who need accommodation, ensure that voters' choices are securely and accurately recorded. So we ask the Board of Elections to take all possible actions to ensure that all North Carolinians can cast a ballot that will be accurately counted by ensuring that they all have paper ballots. Thank you.
The reason I asked you about Apex, because I saw the Raleigh Apex branch on here, because I was born in Apex. Back long before there was a hospital anywhere near there. We now have the Reverend Anthony Spearman, whom I've met only by email recently. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I am the Reverend Dr. T. Anthony Spearman, the President of the North Carolina NAACP, and as an avid voter, taught by parents who had to fight for the right to vote, 100 years after the right to vote was constitutionally theirs. I'm proud to announce that I have cast a ballot in every election, midterm, off-term, and presidential since my 18th birthday. Additionally, after serving or seizing the opportunity to get involved as a precinct worker about 15 years ago in the state of North Carolina, and moving from computer specialist to judge to chief judge, and presently serving as a member of the Guilford County Board of Elections, I've done my best to ensure that I do my due diligence in all matters pertaining to those who vote in my precinct. I just come today to compel you, the members of the State Board of Elections, and you, our newly appointed Executive Director, to always do your due diligence, especially in restoring trust to our voting process. Frankly and personally speaking, I do not believe that a 20-minute public demonstration is enough to time for due diligence. But that's my opinion. I do believe, however, that we should not let the perfect become the enemy of the good. I've heard it said that time is not on our side as it relates to changing our process and systems. Time must always be on our side, especially when it comes to voting. Let us not become complicit with those who are seeking to destroy our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Our next speaker looks like it's Thomas Casper.
Lopez. I think I'm right after Tomas Lopez.
Lopez from, I'm sorry, but I can't read.
I think it's my poor handwriting. Democracy, North Carolina.
Yes.
Sorry.
Your handwriting is like mine. I can't read.
You have my sympathies then.
Well, thank you and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Tomas Lopez. I'm the Executive Director of Democracy North Carolina, which, among other goals, regularly advocates before this agency for policies and practices that protect voting access, security, and confidence. I want to note that earlier in the notice and comment process, we encourage the State Board to support thorough and transparent RFP and contracting processes when it comes to these new machines. Today, I want to urge you to proceed to the extent permissible with certifying those portions of proposed systems that use tabulators or hand-marked paper ballots and to limit ballot marking devices, the BMDs, for use with voters only with accessibility needs. As others have said and will say, hand-marked ballots generally represent a leading option both for voters to understand their choices and for overall public confidence in the voting process. Second, in light of the wide public interest in the certification process, I want to urge the agency to put forward additional clarity moving forward on both the certification process and the devices and the systems under consideration. Based on the information made available to the public, a concerned layperson would not necessarily be able to discern what precisely is being certified, the difference between different components and systems, and the distinctions between the use cases for some of the ballot marking devices being put forward. Lastly, I want to put forward that some of these BMDs, even between them, have distinctions. Some of them produce different looking ballot summary cards, and that's another reason why, again, additional clarity on this process would, I think, really help the public moving forward. As you're well aware, risk limiting audits are a really important piece of this picture. Public interest and concern in these systems and in voting security generally is only going to increase over the next year. You are positioned to lend a lot of clarity to this process, and you can start by using a system that voters trust. Again, we want access, we want security, and we want confidence. Those are the steps that we can take moving forward. So thank you.
Our next speaker is Chris Teleska. I think I mispronounced your name.
That's all right, I'm used to it.
Hello, members of the State Board. My name is Chris Teleska. I'm a verified voting advocate, and I worked to pass the Public Confidence in Elections Act back in 2005. 9 months after that law passed, the State Board developed and followed certification procedures that had us voting on new machines in the May 2006 primary. Over the next 7 years, the State Board and staff certified at least a couple of batches of new stuff, which is why we're currently using the DS200 and 850 scanners and the Unity software and firmware. And then all of a sudden, things seem to stop dead in their tracks. In 2013, the legislature passed a law decertifying our touchscreen voting machines, which presumably would be a great opportunity for new vendors to try and sell election systems in our state. It took 3.5 years for procedures to certify the new machines and vendors to be written by the staff and approved by the board in January 2017. And in the 2.5 years since then, nearly 6 years total since 2013, the State Board hasn't certified any new vendors, software, firmware, or hardware. We kind of know why that happened a little bit, but anyway, so why the rush now? We only had 6 days notice of today's equipment demonstration scheduled for a recess during a Sunday evening meeting with no time for written public comments before a final certification vote today. So I'm asking you, please slow down and reconsider starting over for the following reasons. All the election systems currently under consideration work on Windows 7, which Microsoft is going to stop supporting soon. Let's wait a little longer for the vendors to get their new Windows 10 stuff through EAC certification. Maybe let's wait a few weeks so that your certifications aren't reversed by legislation to extend the DRE moratorium and perhaps increase the amount of the surety bond. Let me just say that you can use the DS200s and the Automarks. They still are able to be used in North Carolina, and they're still available. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Jennifer Bremer, the League of Women Voters. Now, maybe Hope I wasn't mispronouncing your name.
Close enough. Yeah, I'm Jennifer Bremer with the Board of the League of Women Voters of North Carolina. I'm very glad to be here today. The League of Women Voters of North Carolina urges the State Board, the County Boards of Election, and our fellow citizens to bear in mind that voting is a fundamental right and must be guaranteed. As such, we recommend that the board withhold certification until a more thorough voting system evaluation can be completed. Effective suffrage is predicated on voting systems that protect and correctly tally every vote that is cast. This means that we need a system that is where we have voter verifiable, hand-marked paper ballots that allow the voter to confirm that the record reflects their intent, that provide an equivalent, and also to provide an equivalent voting verifiable ballot for citizens that need that, to allow the voter to verify and correct their votes during the voting process, to allow the vote totals to be verified by a hand count of the paper ballots if necessary, and enable officials to conduct routine audits, as well as being fully consistent with the physical security and cybersecurity safeguards that are developed by the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Fortunately, we have a statute in place that requires that after December 2019, voting systems use a voter verifiable paper ballot. The NCSB has built on the framework to develop an election system certification program to vet these things. Unfortunately, their certification program is largely based on the U.S. Election Assistance Commission certification process, which is widely recognized by election experts as antiquated. There is no need for the NCSB to make this decision without a full understanding of the consequences. The 29 counties listed still using direct recorded electronic DRE voting machines can switch to hand-marked paper ballots as used by other counties. So thank you very much.
I'm sorry, but I'm having to read the handwriting and try to pronounce the words. This looks like Wyatt Hayes or Matt Hayes. My second attempt, correct?
Matt Hughes. Normally people tell me my handwriting is very good, Mr. Chairman, so I certainly apologize.
Well, it's pretty. It's just...
I'll take that as a compliment. My name is Matt Hughes. I'm the second vice chair of the State Democratic Party, and I come today representing our state executive committee, which passed a resolution last month on the issue of the integrity of the voting process. And here's pretty much the highlights of that resolution. The state board needs to ask vendors who their investors are, not just simply who owns them. Only hand-marked paper ballots should be used, and that barcodes and QR codes should not be used on the ballots because voters cannot verify their choices as they are not machines. Scanners should notify voters of not only overvotes, which some of the machines currently do, but undervotes as well before accepting the ballots. Most importantly, that the vote tabulation machines be appropriately secured from wireless interference, and that these machines should not contain uncertified technology such as bots or other AI that might be included in the machines. And finally, we need voters to know their votes are being counted and that they mean something when those ballots are cast. Voters do not have confidence in our system as it currently stands, with reports of Russian interference and hacking and all sorts of other things that they hear on the news every day. And these are not just the concerns of North Carolina Democrats, but the concerns of voters all across North Carolina, irrespective of their political affiliation. And I would just like to say, as a local elected official in Hillsborough, where I serve as a town commissioner, I want my constituents to have trust in the system that when they go and they mark a ballot and they put it into the machine, that vote is accurately counted and that their choice, win or lose, is reflected in the vote totals, and that they have the trust and confidence that their local and state and national leaders were elected in a fair election that was transparent and that we can have confidence was secure.
speaker is Nancy Bryan, correct, from Orange County.
A long time ago, I used to work for the Durham County Board of Elections, and one of the things that I had to do when I was working there, they were making some decisions about what kind of voting equipment to buy at the time. And I did a lot of research on this kind of thing. It's old information, but I think there's some parts of it that will never change. And so I've got these things to say. First of all, I think one of the most important things you need to consider in this is public perception. I think that is really the name of the game. Public perception. Like most people in this world, in this room, I'll bet you have been working on a computer that suddenly doesn't do what it is supposed to be doing. They do that. Things go awry. And I think that if you are relying on a touch screen or other hyper electronic device, that there's clearly the chance that that machine will begin to misbehave during, if not the first election, maybe the 17th election. But anyway, it just happens a lot. So to the extent that you're dependent on some kind of device to cast your vote, if the machine stops working, you don't have any way for that machine to be used. You've got a reduced number of working machines for the public who are in line to vote. If the power goes off, and that happens, and if it's a widespread, if there's a hurricane that blows everything down 3 days before, it's going to be a big problem for something that's relying on big time on electricity. With paper ballots, people can come in, even if you don't have a tabulator in the whole county that's working. If none of them are working, the voting public can come in, they can vote their ballots, put them down, and walk out. So anyway, you can count the ballots a week and a half later if you have to. Thank you.
Next speaker is John Fitzbakey.
Breaky, sir.
Thank you. We've seen some email from you too.
It's a pleasure to be here. My name is John Breaky. I'm an election scrutineer. I came into the state about 8-9 weeks ago because I go from state to state doing what we call track condition reports. I'm not here to talk about what I found in my track condition report. I'm here to endorse hand-marked paper ballots. And when I go into a county, the first thing that I ask the counties is that, what do you do to verify elections? And they say to me that they know that the election results are right because they do a logic and accuracy test, which is a good test, and it's a necessity. But also a logic and accuracy test is about the same thing as a Volkswagen emission test, because it also proves that the car was working right. In this country, 580,000 Volkswagen diesels were sold into this country, and it went through emissions maybe as much as 2 million times and passed emissions every time. I want you to know that that computer in that machine was built to cheat. It knew it was being tested because the back wheels had a sensor, and the sensor said, hey, you're being tested, don't act right, okay? We need a system that we can have elections that are transparent, trackable, and publicly verified. And the reason we have to have it, the cynicism in this country is out of hand. 44% of the American people in this country who could vote don't vote. Some of those people belong to what I call the Mark Twain Party. That's the party that believes that if elections made a difference, they wouldn't let us do it. We need to work hard to make elections transparent, trackable, and publicly verified. I want you to know, in the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton, if the 44% was the people who didn't vote, that means that Hillary got 26%, Trump got 25%, 3% went to other parties. But I want you to know, in 1932, another man did better. He got 34%, and that was Adolf Hitler. Our democracy only works when we, the people, make it work. You know, I'm a grandfather, and I'm very concerned what's happening in this country. You know, we have turned into tribes, and we are not working together. And I thank you, Dr. Spearman, for working with me and helping us organize a coalition in this state to lead and to be able to do something that he said that was very important. He sits on a board. And in Florida, he said, you know, when people come in and criticize me after a decision, why weren't you here beforehand? We are here beforehand. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our next speaker is Doreen Close, if I've said that correctly. Reading this next one is Selma Suter. A board member of, it looks like DC or HC. All right, thank you. And then Michael D. Kane, a private citizen.
My main point of view is why change the system that works? Why do we need this? That's all.
Mr. Miller or Millen?
Hi.
Oh, Mrs. Millen, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's a tough one. Good evening. My name is Siobhan Millen, and I'm a poll worker and precinct judge during elections here in Wake County. As you may know, Wake County's system has 3 important traits. Number 1, hand-marked reviewable paper ballots. Number 2, a ballot tabulator that is no longer ever connected to the internet nor the wireless phone system. Number 3, hand counts of several randomly chosen precincts after the initial tabulation is made. That system is the gold standard of today's voting systems. It enables us to say with confidence to voters who ask about the possible vote hacking they read about, Wake County already has the system that proposed national legislation is suggesting for everyone, reviewable paper ballots with post-election audits. Let's not take a step backwards by allowing voting machines anywhere in the state that produce a piece of barcode tape and pretend that is the same as a reviewable paper ballot. A barcode cannot be double-checked by the voter for correctness. I don't speak barcode, and the voters don't either. Given the current hacking capabilities, the fewer computer components that are in a voting system, the better. Bottom line, our system ain't broke, so don't fix it. Even if some of our current tabulating machines are old and creaky, I'd rather we stick with the system we have today than experiment with a system that has fewer safeguards and backups. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Millen, and we appreciate your service as a poll worker here in this county. As you all may know, we have 100 counties in North Carolina, over 7,500 precincts.
2,700 precincts.
20. There's just a lot of people needed as poll workers, volunteers, and we appreciate anybody that does that in their county. This is a dance, Mr. Dancy.
Yes, Camillus Dancy.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Nobody else get my name.
The first name is?
Spell it for him. C-U-R-M-I-L-U-S.
All right.
Camillus.
Camillus. All right. Thank you, Mr. Dancy.
Okay. Good evening. Like I said, my name is Camillus Dancy. I'm a local blogger in Edgecombe County,
and I have served on the Democratic Party since I began voting when I was 18, and I'm now be 57 on Christmas Day. I have faithfully attended the Edgecombe County Board of Election meetings all of this time as well, and just attended a meeting last week. I joined the NAACP in 1992 and I have served on the executive committee basically since that time as well, in the NAACP meeting last week. I stand before you to say I have not missed voting since I turned 18. So I support paper ballots. After every election, I will always go to the Board of Elections meeting to make sure they verified and make sure people votes were counted, also taking off work to do so. So I just want to echo that I stand behind the state NAACP president and all that he said and everything everybody else said that was for paper ballots. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dancy. Troy Shields. Is Mr. Shields here? Alicia Vermillion. Dr. Silver.
Well, I'm not a doctor, but my name is Silver.
You're Andrew Silver. I thought you were doctors.
Maybe some people think I look like that. Okay. But I'm only a master. Honorable Chairman and board members, if you haven't read the Mueller report, or you haven't read the Senate Intelligence Committee's report on Russian interference in the 2016 election, I suggest either you read it or get a good summary to review before you make any decision about certifying direct recording electronic voting machines. Whatever you've decided or thought about up to now, I think you should put aside and go back to square one to say, how can our elections be most secure and invulnerable to interference by the Russian intelligence operatives? Really, just go back to square one and think about that. And the answer that most people have, which is what we've heard from most of the previous speakers, is voter-verified paper ballots. And also it's good to have the random hand-counted paper audits after each election. Another issue is where do you get your advice? Who are the experts? Who are the people you really trust? Is it the Election Center? Or is it the Brennan Center? Or verifiedvoting.org? If it's the Election Center, I think you are probably aware that they generally push direct recording electronic voting machines. So if that's your main source of influence, again, you should step back and look at the other groups of experts. Verifiedvoting.org is led by many of the top professors of computer science in the country. And they generally are against direct recording electronic voting machines.
Thank you, Mr. Silver. Rhonda Bond from Wake County. Rhonda Bond is...
I believe she's left, sir.
All right, thank you. Maria Cervania.
Good
Good evening, Chairman, Board. Thank you for the opportunity for the public to speak in regards to certification of election machines this evening. I'm here actually my name is Maria Cervania, and I'm Cary Vice Chair of the Wake County Democratic Party. I'm going to be reading a statement by our chair, Rebecca Llewellyn, who is unfortunately not able to join us this evening. As chair of the Wake County Democratic Party, I'm concerned that our elections be fair, free, and verifiable. At this time, when we know our election process is at risk from attack, that sweeping and systematic attacks have been made and ongoing attacks have been expected and can be expected. Therefore, we cannot support certification of machines that do not provide voters with their own votes to check and verifiable paper ballot backup. Barcodes that do not show the voters how they voted as they can verify on their own ballot, that cannot be clearly read independently from the machine process, are not good enough. Even though Wake County is not affected by the machines that are being presented for certification today, we are concerned that all North Carolina counties have a process that provides hand-marked paper ballots and that we can retain and that can be recounted. We join the League of Women Voters and the other organizations and private citizens here today to ask the Board of Elections and that the representatives not to certify these machines and to continue to seek the best possible verifiable system for voting at all polls across the state of North Carolina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe that ends our participation from the outside speakers. We have a request that we go into a closed session because of legal matters and the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and our public body. So that I move that the board go into closed session pursuant to GS section 143-318.11 sub A sub 3 to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the state board and its attorneys.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. No. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Call the meeting of the State Board back to order. After discussion with our legal counsel, I have moved to recess our meeting until tomorrow night at 7 p.m. in the same room when all members of the State Board will be present and will be able to vote. Is there any further discussion? If none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. It's a unanimous motion. And you all are welcome to be here tomorrow. We're glad to have you, and thank you for coming.
What time?
What time tomorrow? 7 p.m. 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
Thank